Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 8 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. You got your two hosts here, JNT250, along with myself, Blue Jay. We have quite a bit to cover this week, so I don't want to talk too much before we just hop into topics. Just a quick little setup for the show. We're going to talk about IWDominate and being banned from the LPP program. And then our main topic for this week is just talking about where every team's story will end. So, a little example of that would be if for some reason I'm crazy and I think that Immortals is going to go to Worlds and win Worlds, well, obviously their story ends at Worlds. Um, and just for those that are listening on YouTube, you probably won't hear an echo, but for those listening live on Twitch, we did have some issues for some reason in fixing the audio earlier. We did a test and it randomly fixed itself, so we're gonna hope that it does the same. We couldn't figure out why it was having a little bit of an echo. But if you're listening on YouTube, there's a good chance that you don't hear it because when we listened to the recording, there was none. I don't really got too much else to say before we get into topics because we do have a lot to cover. Anything you want to shout out or talk about before we get into our first topics, JNT?
Yeah, been playing a lot of Valorant recently.
Pog, how's that
Yeah,
been going?
yeah, learning Viper. That character's Pog.
Okay, I'm glad we're getting all the important stuff out of the way. Anyways, so our first topic, as I did mention, is IWDominate being banned from the LPP, and that means he is not able to co-stream. The LPP being the league partner program. Basically, he wasn't given a lot of information for why he was banned. I'll let JNT read to you some of the messages that were exchanged between IWDominate and Riot. Go ahead.
Yeah, so just for context and maybe for any listeners who aren't watching either on the YouTube video or on the live stream, what I'm just about to read out here is a statement that was given to I Will Dominate after he was kind of, I guess, questioning his ban, and he was fine. He was asking for a specific reason on why he got banned. So I'm just going to read out the statement that he gave to, that Riot gave to him. It says, "Hello, Christian." Christian's his first name if people don't know, because I assume most people know him as Dom. Though it's unfortunate that we are speaking to each other under these circumstances, this decision is final until the next review period mentioned in the previous email, which is June 2021. I want to reinforce that this is not a decision that the LCS and LPP teams made lightly. I respect the time and effort that you've put into your channels and co-streaming. I also recognize that you have a brand and a voice that at times may differ from our values. However, you've shared sentiments and comments with the community that we cannot tolerate or endorse. We can't make exceptions as it relates to targeted toxicity, sexism, or racially offensive jokes. These are areas where we need to raise our expectations for partners, not lower them. This standard will hold true for all partners as the program continues to develop and grow. As you are already on probation from the program and have behaved in this way consistently over time, this decision is not up for debate. While I sympathize your situation, while I sympathize with your situation, access to LPP and co-streaming benefits are reserved for creators and community leaders who show respect to others in and out of game. It's my sincere hope that we can still work together to ensure these privileges are reinstated after the aforementioned review period next year. I appreciate your patience with my response.
Yeah, so quite the lengthy little message that they sent him, and originally they sent an even smaller, a little bit of a smaller message, not really saying too much either, just notifying him that he's banned, and that's what kind of set off the panic amongst the whole community. Because there's a lot of IWDominate fans out there that were not happy. Anybody who was watching on Twitch this weekend would have seen that Twitch chat was filled with free Dom or free IWDominate or whatever, just spamming a bunch of things, just begging Riot to unban him. But as you could see from this message, it doesn't look like they're going to budge on that.
Yeah, they use a lot of stern language in their message that they responded, basically saying that the next review period isn't till the next year. And I would assume for Dom, like I gotta sympathize with him a little bit because I assume that's pretty disappointing. I know that when Worlds came around last year, co-streaming was approved for I believe the group matches and for the quarterfinals. And I remember I was watching some LS co-streams for that. But I would assume that Dom had, he was pretty excited to one be allowed to co-stream and two use this for the majority of his content for I guess some of the bigger matches when they come around like NALCS finals or NALCS playoffs plus any worlds content. So I got to sympathize with him a little bit, and he's got to be pretty disappointed himself. I know if you saw any of the clips that were on front page Reddit or were watching his stream, kind of when all this news broke, he was pretty emotional about it all. So I got to feel for him in that way. But I don't know. In terms of being banned, I think everyone kind of knows that Dom is a fairly toxic person. We were just kind of like, before we turned on the stream, we were just remembering that. And if people didn't know, he got banned for a year from competitive play back in 2013 for being toxic. So it's kind of something that's been sort of attributed to his both personality and brand. So it's not super surprising that Riot is kind of, you know, cracking down on these quote unquote toxic streamers.
And yeah, and like you said, you feel for Dom because especially if you would feel for anybody that kind of warps all of their content towards that area, like they made a full shift in his content and what he's doing towards being able to co-stream. So that kind of feels bad, but I also really feel bad for the IWDominate fans. Now, I want to be clear here. I am not someone that watches a lot of Dom. I have watched a fair bit in the past, but I'm not a huge IWDominate fan. So I can't say I know exactly what it's like, but I can try to imagine that if I were like, okay, so for those that don't know, I'm a huge Meteos fan. So let's say Meteos was doing the same thing, and for whatever reason, Meteos gets banned from doing co-streams. I would be pretty upset. And so I do have to feel for the I Will Dominate fans, because, and a lot of people also mentioned this, that was the only way that they consumed the LCS. So this will also hurt the LCS and Riot. However, um, when it comes to telling him why he got banned, I think he absolutely deserves to know. So they said something along the lines of him to him saying that they didn't want to tell him why because then it would leave it open to discussion or to debate or something along those lines. And to me, if you can't tell someone why they were banned, they probably don't deserve a ban in the first place. Another thing is that as you mentioned, he's been pretty toxic in the past. And so if he were to be banned, I'm surprised that he hasn't been banned for something that's happened in the past because he does have a pretty toxic history.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I was sort of surprised about, and I guess, oh, here, I'll give some more context to this before I speak on it, but people were kind of inferring on Twitter and Reddit, like, based off the language that they used in this statement that you can see on screen and the one that I just read out before, but basically saying, I'll just specifically, it says, we can't make exceptions as it relates to targeted toxicity, sexism, or racially offensive jokes. And just if you're like myself, if you're ever looking at the league front page and on a daily basis, I think it was maybe, I want to say 3 weeks to 4 weeks ago when Dom sort of got not necessarily into it, but a girl streamer called him out on Twitter because he made sort of what you could say is a sexist joke, saying he was in a rank game with this player and said that since they were playing the support role, he said support is doing their nails instead of playing the game. So, this girl streamer called him out on Twitter, and Dom got actually quite a lot of hate for it for being quite sexist, even though in his defense, or at least he says in his defense, that he didn't know it was a girl and he didn't really mean anything by it. He was kind of just, you know, as his personality and brand is, just being a little bit toxic. So for me, I was a little bit surprised that this ban didn't come down any sooner. It kind of
Mm-hmm.
brings into question the validity of the ban. And as you said, like, if you can't have like a clear cut reasoning and you can't give that to him, it's kind of weird that you banned him in the first place. And considering he's a very toxic person, like there hasn't been any instance recently, not in like the last couple weeks, where he did something super toxic or super out of the norm or super, people never thought he went too far. So it was kind of something that just came up out of the blue. So I definitely think there's a bit of confusion and I think cause for concern around this from both his side and from Riot's side in terms of clarity on the ban and just knowing for future reference kind of I guess what the limits are and like what's too far.
Yeah, so for sure. And it makes me ask, like, okay, if he gets banned for this, like, who's next? And, like, because there's quite a few people that are on the league partner program. I can't name them all. I really don't know all of them. But there's quite a few people. And so you have to wonder, like, who's next if there's going to be other people that are going to be banned. And another thing, though, is that if this is Riot's version of cracking down on toxicity, we have to remember that just about a month ago, maybe it was 2 months ago, but a lot of us all saw when Voyboy was sitting on the stairs, and basically he said like the league community's
Hashtag
gone
save
too
league.
far. Yeah, like, and you know what? He had a good point. Like, League is a very toxic game. There's a very toxic community there, and so you have to wonder, is this Riot's way of trying to fix the community a little bit by saying like, look, we're not okay with like our big content creators out there being toxic as well. So is that what like they're kind of trying to have people lead by example? And it's like it makes me think like maybe you got to be careful for what you wish for, because this seems like this is the way that Riot's going to go about it, about trying to fix the toxicity issue in the League of Legends community. Do I agree with it? Not really. Not I again, if you can't tell someone what they were banned for, they probably don't deserve a ban, so I don't really agree with it. But it looks like that's what we're getting, so yeah, like I said, careful what you wish for.
Yeah, I think, maybe the main thing that I can really can think about with this is that maybe they're just trying to set an example with him. And I mean, to that case, it's kind of completely, it's understandable to ban a fairly large figure in the league scene, especially someone who's known for being toxic. So I guess like if they're really trying to make an example out of IWDominate and they're being pretty stern with it, which it seems like they are based on one, the situation, and two, the language of everything that's been going on with the messages that he's been receiving. Sorry about that. But yeah, I mean, maybe they're just trying to make an example out of him. That's kind of what I feel is happening here.
And even if that is the case, like, come on, man, you don't just make it do anything just to make an example. Wait till someone actually does something that is toxic. That's when you ban someone. That's what making an example of someone should be. But
Yeah,
I think I've said enough on
yeah,
that.
it just feels like the timing of this is all off, and that's why it just feels a little weird.
Yeah, in the end, do I think he deserves the ban? The short answer is no. I don't think he deserves the ban. I think that there are plenty of other things that he should have been banned for, and if you can't tell him, then he probably doesn't deserve it. A little bit more on co-streamings though, or on co-streams. I wanted to know your thoughts on what how they've been so far throughout the summer split.
Yeah, I think, just as we were just talking about previous, Dom is sort of, he's transitioned a lot of his content towards the LCS and doing these co-streams. So I don't know, it's pretty weird. I think co-streaming was something that I think people were very excited about when it first got announced back in season 9, and then it was, allowed to be continued towards season 10. There were a few specific content creators that got approved for co-streaming. Then the majority, the highly named ones were like LS, Dom, and some other I don't know some other high profile league content creators. But I don't know. It just feels co-streaming has sort of died off in terms of their popularity and the numbers
The
that they pull
hype,
on Twitch. Yeah, the hype. That's
yeah.
that's a good way to put it. The hype has kind of died down. I know. I think people are taking a more of a relaxed approach to the co-streaming. Like people are memeing a lot more instead of doing super serious commentary and gameplay analysis. I know I used to watch LS's co-streams quite a lot in towards the end of season 10 and the world's content that he was doing in season 9. But it seems that he's become a lot more relaxed with it, and that's kind of the whole vibe I'm getting around co-streaming. Is it's just becoming relaxed, and it's just a way for creators to chill with their chat while watching LCS. And if you love watching that specific content creator, then I think that's great for it. But in terms of the average fan that's maybe going to a Twitch stream to see like some high level analysis or gameplay, that's kind of doesn't really seem to be going in that direction.
Yeah, I just again when we talk about the hype specifically, I really thought that there would be a lot more viewers on these co-streams, and sure enough, it did start that way. But like you said, it kind of died down a little bit. However, I also think the quality has died down a little bit, more specifically with LS. We mentioned how like sometimes he'll have random guests on. Like I think he had Tyler One's girlfriend on, and like she's not really like an LCS analyst by any means.
I think
And
she is
so like
silver, so
yeah, and like that really puts into perspective the kind of people that are on this show. Like, I think a lot of people, I know myself, I should speak for myself here. I know that I really enjoy having people that know what they're talking about, and that's why I go to the regular broadcast where I can have an actual shoutcaster and a color commentator. I think it helps the stream a lot more when I'm watching that version rather than a co-stream. So even though I still think co-streams have the potential to completely change the way esports are viewed, I guess I don't think it's going to happen as soon as I thought it would.
yeah, definitely agree.
I don't really have too much else to say about Dom or the co-streams in general. Did you have anything else before we move on to our second topic?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, so let's shift over to our second topic, which is actually the Team Liquid and Cloud9 game. For anybody that missed it, this was a game this weekend that was like incredibly hype. And this was like hype even before the game started. This was like draft was absolutely insane. No one knew what the hell was going on. C9 decided to completely turn what you thought would be a normal draft into, I don't know, something that was completely haywire. What were your thoughts on this weekend's game between those two teams, the battle
Yeah,
for first place?
yeah, I remember I was making lunch and then I came back down and then I see that Sona and Lux are locked in and on B2, B3. So at first I really didn't know what to think. After hearing the shoutcasters talk about it a little bit, saying that it's a bot lane, I was pretty intrigued, honestly, to see where it was going. Before the game started, I thought it was going to have sort of a Sonateric type vibe to it,
Yeah.
not necessarily where well, not necessarily like the playstyle of Sona and Tarek, but that sort of similar laning where, they're not really going for CS and they're going for the Spell Thieves poke. So, and I thought it was really interesting the strategy they implemented with the Sona and the Lux pick, which is where at, certain points in the lane, they would have one person taking the farm and the other person going for Spell Thief procs, and then they would sort of flip it on the cooldown of the Spell Thieves proc. Because if you don't know, the cooldown on your Spell Thieves gold passive generation, where you hit enemies and you get gold in return, it gets extended if you last hit minions. So I thought it was actually a really interesting strategy that they sort of implemented with Sona taking the first wave of CS while the Lux is trying to hit enemy laners for the Spell Thieves procs, and then they would flip it around once the cooldown of the Sona would go down from hitting the the creeps. So I thought it was a really interesting strategy, and at least in terms of like the game itself, you kind of saw it have some early success in terms of poking the lane, but it sort of fizzled out. With C9's comp, it was a win early and snowball throughout the game. And sort of once they kind of stalled out in the mid game and TL was kind of able to take control of the game, it was pretty much over within 5 minutes.
Yeah, this draft I was going absolutely crazy for. So you weren't at your computer, and I don't think Scott was either. I'm messaging you. I'm messaging Scott. I'm like, is anybody seeing this draft right now? I need to talk with someone about this draft. It was crazy. So for our listeners, or for those that just didn't see it, actually, we had Shen in the top lane. We had Hecarim in the jungle. Set mid. This is Cloud9's team, by the way. Set mid, and then like JNT mentioned, you had the Lux in the Sona in the bot lane. And this game was definitely on Cloud9's side of things to start off the game. They were snowballing heavily, and Blabber was absolutely on a tear. He was in top lane, he was mid, and then he was bot. Like, he was ganking everywhere, and he managed to not really fall behind in CS whatsoever. So it was really impressive out of Cloud9. The part in the draft where I think they got it wrong was leaving up the Blitzcrank. And that's not just because they were against Core JJ. But Core JJ's Blitzcrank is absolutely awesome, and he is the reason they won that game. I think that Cloud9 can run this draft back in future games, and I think they'll win almost all of them as long as they ban the Blitzcrank. So I don't think this is actually the last time we're going to see this kind of draft, but I want to know your thoughts on that. Do you think we're going to see it again anytime soon?
Yeah, I thought it was super interesting. I really love it when teams are innovating in the draft. At the start of the season, we've referenced this before, but Mad Lions, when they originally brought out the Wukong Senna in counter to leaving the Varus up back when Varus was like 100% pick ban champion. They would leave the Varus up and then pick Wukong Senna into it. And I thought that was a really, like, anytime Mad Lions busted that out, that was a really great draft. C9 actually did it against TSM a couple weeks ago. And, C9 they've really been innovating in draft in terms of these champion picks. I think the two teams that I think are most experimental in their draft. I guess three teams now, honestly, are Cloud9, Golden Guardians, and Immortals. These are teams that all have like a very, very wide champion pool, and they're willing to pick whatever they want. I know an interesting stat they brought up on the stream was that with C9's draft, it was all like a new, unique champion. Like they had never played the champion at all prior in this split. So, and one thing I like specifically out of Cloud9 is that they're willing to go for this kind of draft in like a high pressure game against a good team
Yeah.
like Team Liquid. And I think honestly, for the most part, it was fairly successful. They got I think a 5K gold lead early on in the game, around like 15, maybe it wasn't 5K, maybe it was 4K, around 15 to 20 minutes, and then you kind of saw there was some mis-execution in the game, and their comp kind of fizzled out by the 25-minute mark, and it was kind of an easy win for TL.
Yeah, and one thing that Crumbs said on the analyst desk was like, why not try this comp against someone like Immortals? You played them the day before. And Mark Z replied right away with, because when you beat Immortals, it doesn't mean anything, right? You don't know if you've got a comp now. And I think one thing that, even though they lost, I think that one thing that Cloud9 did was they proved that this is a comp they can run. Like, this is actually something that they can play in future games and have success with it. I think they just need to ban the Blitzcrank, like I mentioned. So I do think that this is something we're going to see again. And I also want to talk about Niski. His set in the mid lane was unreal. I think you mentioned this when we were watching the games. It was Jensen-esque. he was dodging everything and he was outplaying Jensen. Like what he did to Jensen was very much a Jensen kind of play style. He was dodging and getting all of his autos in, getting all of his abilities in, really bullying the lane on a set into a Syndra. So that was really impressive. I thought it was such a good game out of Niski, despite the fact that they weren't able to close it out.
Yeah, just like you said, like he was kind of just Jensening Jensen. Like he was dodging the majority of Syndra's skill shots. He was excuse me, he was pretty dominant in lane, had constant lane pressure. We saw throughout the entirety of the early game, Niski sacrificing HP and sometimes sacrificing CS for Blabber, moving with Blabber into the jungle to get crabs, to move to certain lanes, and that's something I think we've heavily, that's part of Niski's play style. Like he's not your traditional, he hasn't, at least he doesn't play like your traditional mid laner who plays control mages, hits the wave, pushes the wave, then roams. He's willing to play around his jungler, sometimes sack a wave if he needs to for the better of the team. And I think in terms of this game specifically, talking about Niski versus Jensen, for me, this kind of reaffirmed that Niski is the best mid laner in the league in terms of his champion pool, his play, and his effect on the map. I think a lot of people they have been praising Jensen this split, and for good reason. I think Jensen has
Yep,
actually been playing really well, and I think he
agreed.
could be up for debate currently. Like I wouldn't have a problem with people arguing him as currently the best performing mid laner, but for me at least, this game sort of kind of put Niski back in front of him.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Totally agree, 100%. Anything else on this topic before we move on to our main topic?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think most people will think, and I think the average viewer might just assume TL is better than C9 at their current form based on the results of this game. But I don't exactly see it that way. I mean, I still think C9 is a stronger team. They went for something in the draft. It didn't really work out in terms of the end result, but I think it was definitely a good learning experience. Cloud9 talks a lot about, they don't fear losing. They lose and then they get productivity out of their losses, whether that's in terms of fixing their mistakes, finding any draft errors, and just being able to improve themselves for when the important parts of the season come around, which is playoffs and worlds.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing that I think that this game did allow them to do is it has now they have another weapon that they can use, and it's a weapon that plays to their play style, right? With the Shen being able to ult just about anybody going in, like that is so C9 and Blabber kind of play style. So I think that this is something that
Oops.
even though they lost, it's definitely a +1 in terms of comps that they can run back. So something that's really good for C9 despite the loss. And hats off to TL because now they are tied for first place, and their schedule isn't that difficult going forward. But we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to them later at the end of our next topic. Speaking of our next topic, we wanted to go over this week. This is our main topic for the week. We wanted to go over where does each team's story end, and I think that we've gone through enough weeks of the split now where we can kind of make a prediction as to how far this team's going to make it. If we think they're going to Worlds, if we think they're just not even going to make playoffs, or where we think they're going to finish in playoffs. So first up, we wanted to go in the opposite order of the way that they're ranked in the standings. So we're going to start with the bottom, starting with Immortals. Um, they're currently not looking too good as far as their standings. I have them go missing playoffs. I assume you would have them missing playoffs as well, JNT.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this team, it's sad because they didn't play the whole split and they started to look a little bit better. However, with this roster, they're still 3-7 with the current roster that is playing. And you could all day say they should be 5-5 because there was two games when they first started playing that they could have easily won. It was very close, but they didn't, right? And so if someone doesn't win, it's hard to be like, oh, they should do this, they should do that, but they didn't, you know. So because this team is 3-7 with this roster, I don't see anything getting much better all of a sudden. Their current record has them out of the playoffs, and it's not even near the playoffs anyways. So I don't think I think this team is actually going to finish 10th. I have them finishing either 3-15 or 4-14.
Yeah, I'm definitely in agreement. I think they're, by the end of the season, they'll be the last place team in the league. Unfortunately, I have them, as you could have mentioned, a 3-15 record, missing playoffs. But with Immortals, I think people were looking forward to this roster when they originally put their quote unquote academy roster back in, which was three
Yep.
fifths of their old LCS roster for Xmithie, Apollo, and Hakuho. But when this roster got subbed in the first place, people were, I think, really excited. They had some good wins. They kind of picked off right up at the bat. And like you mentioned, they had two close games that they could have won had they not misplayed a little bit into the late game. But for Immortals, for me, I'm really looking for next year for this team. I think there's a lot to be excited about with this team, specifically in
Yep.
terms of Alarm and Insanity. I know we've kind of been talking them up the last couple episodes, and I think for good reason. They've both actually been
Yep.
playing very, very well. They have a pretty wide champion pool. They're the only, I think, Alarm's the only top laner who's picked Urgot so far, and I think in both of his Urgot games, it actually looked pretty good. Insanity is pretty much playing unique champion after unique champion. We saw some AP Kog'Maw mid. He's played two games of Karthus now, and his Orianna play was pretty good and a couple losing efforts. So I think for this team to moving on to 2021 and getting a full off season together, practicing against LCS teams, and one thing you gotta take into account with this team is they're playing with basically a coaching staff that came in on their coaching staff. Part of their coaching staff doesn't even play League. Like they were taking people from their Overwatch League team to come in and help their coaching staff out because they had to get rid of their old GM Keaton and their old head coach Zabatine. So
I
this is a
think their
team.
GM is from Overwatch, to be specific. I think it's their GM. Pretty sure.
Yeah, but still, like to have somebody on your coaching staff and your management, I guess in this case management, then from a different
Mhm.
game, it doesn't necessarily boost your chances in terms of production in the NALCS. So I'm hoping that this team, not roster wise, but within the organization, goes through a little bit of a change. They bring in some smart people, and they're really able to utilize these two young players in Allurement and Insanity and build towards 2021.
Yeah, so I totally agree that it doesn't help having your management that doesn't have a League of Legends background. Whereas, like some other teams do have that advantage. You look at immediately, you look to 100 Thieves. Like even if the coaching staff misses something, there's a chance that Papa Smithy realizes something that's going wrong with the team and can relay that information to the players or the coaching staff. So it's just an extra little thing to have that would be really nice. And unfortunately, Immortals doesn't have that. You mentioned how Insanity and Alorum have been fun to watch, and they have a reason to be excited. I couldn't agree more. I do think that they have some room to grow, especially Insanity, because I think that this is a guy with a massive champion pool, and I'm really excited to see what he has to offer. And I think Alorum is just solid. And I don't want to talk too much about these guys because, as you mentioned, we have talked about them in the past. But it doesn't stop for me. It doesn't stop their story from ending when summer ends. Like they're just not going to make playoffs. It's too bad. But that's all I really got on Immortals. Tough luck, but I really am looking forward to seeing them next year. Anything else on Immortals before we move on to the next team?
Insanity got the juice.
True, yeah. For anybody that I was maybe missed it this weekend, check out JNT's Twitter. Pretty funny picture of Insanity drinking a massive jug of orange juice
Dude, like,
in the middle of a game.
yeah, like, most players have like either like some coffee or their water bottle or like a Red Bull when they're like chilling playing their game. Like you gotta get a sip of a drink just to refocus or something. And this guy whips out the 4 liter, the 2 liter, 4 liter jug of orange juice like on stream. I got a clip of it. I was like, dude, like, did you see that? This guy is like chugging down orange juice in the middle of the LCS game. I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, that guy's juicing. But anyways, the next team on the list is Dignitas. Um, I actually have them making playoffs now. Just a reminder to everyone that making playoffs does mean eighth place or better. I actually have them finishing seventh. This split, I have them going 6-12, which I believe they only have 4 wins right now. I can't remember their exact record. Maybe
Yeah,
they have
they they
five.
they have 4 wins right now.
Yeah, so their next 4 games are against TL, IMT, Cloud9, and 100 Thieves. And so clearly, I think it's pretty obvious that I'm predicting them to win in the Immortals and 100 Thieves game. Um, but that's kind of crazy. This team that started 0-8, like they're now they're now sitting like with a chance to make playoffs. Which, yeah, maybe it's just seventh place playoffs, but that's still pretty impressive considering where this team started.
Yeah, I think this team, they're really finding their identity. And I think having an identity in your team is really important for one, like consistency and just knowing what you want to do in draft and knowing how you want to play the game out. We saw Dignitas last week and one of their other games this week. When Dardoch and Aframu aren't on playmakers, this team does not look good. Their play is really, really flat. Nothing happens in the early game. It's kind of just farm city, and like they just end up giving objectives because their just comp naturally doesn't do anything. But when you have Dardoch on these playmaking champions and you have Afro on these playmaking champions, specifically this week his Blitzcrank was nuts. He basically kind of like I don't want to say 1v9, but he pretty much 1v9 the game against
No, he
CHG.
1v9 that game, man. That game was lost. He
Yeah,
1v9 that
like
game.
I think they were down like 5K, and he was pretty much hitting hook after hook on Sven Skaren to just like kind of stall the game out. I think AG had two drags up early and just stalled the game out, hooked all the champions, used that ultimate, and he was honestly smurfing that game. But I think back to more serious, Dig, they're really finding their identity, and I think that's really important for a team. And I'm just really I'm really excited to watch them play.
Yeah, and the biggest worry for me with Dignitas is just their top lane. Actually, even though I do agree with you, I think it's good when Dardoch is on and looking good and making plays and whatnot. To me, it's the issue with Viper and Lorlo, and I know we said this last week, but I still can't believe Viper is starting right now. He looks like a liability up there right now, whereas Lorlo was an absolute solid rock. I don't understand why Viper's playing right now. I tweeted out about this saying like Lorlo must be inting scrims because what we're seeing on in the LCS right now, it makes no sense to the viewer why Viper is starting right now. And even in the game that Afro 1v9, you could tell top lane was the biggest thing to have to carry in that game. Viper was losing both of his lanes this weekend. He played against TSM. He played the Jace into the Wukong. Didn't really make anything happen. He was 0-3 by I don't even know what time. It was just like really underwhelming and just like it saddens me because I actually really like Viper, but he's just not getting it done, and Lorlo is. And so if this team is going to make playoffs like I'm predicting, I think that means that Lorlo needs to come in and help them do that because I actually think that they're going to have a hard time winning against Immortals and 100 Thieves without Lorlo.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if he kind of gets the same treatment that he did on FlyQuest. And I mean, I'm saying that more for Lorlo's sake, because I do agree with you. Lorlo's been playing really well, but I wouldn't be surprised if playoffs came around. We're assuming we both have them making playoffs. Playoffs comes around, they get down 0-2 in a series, or they're down 2-1 in a series, and they have to put Lorlo in. Because, like you said, even though they have been winning some of their games recently, Viper has looked like a liability. I know you mentioned the Jace versus Wukong game, and in the game that Afro was playing the Blitz and they beat EG, they were playing a Camille into Volibear. Viper's playing Volibear, and he was like 0-2 in lane. Hooney was, doing a lot of work on the Camille, was getting a good split push going, and had it not been for Afro and his Blitzcrank, they probably would have lost that game, and primarily due to Viper. So definitely a bit of confusion from the Dignitas side. I know it's hard to speculate because we only see the LCS games. We don't see scrims.
Yep.
There's not a lot of talk about scrims kind of in the public. So, as you said, Viper could be smurfing in scrims and Lorlo could be inting scrims, and that's the reason why he's playing. But, I think we both want to see more Lorlo.
Yeah, and I also want to mention that I think Dardoch's been very coin flip. So like he's either like running it down or he's looking really good. And even though like a lot of people will say, well, you don't want to coin flip jungle, and I do agree with that. Coin flip is definitely better than what their record would indicate right now. I think they're sitting at what are they, 4-10 or something like that. That's much worse than a coin flip, obviously, right? So when your team is that bad of a record, I think you'll take a coin flip jungler, and I think that he pairs up really well with Afro because they both have kind of an aggressive play style. And I actually do think that this team has a chance to win a playoff series if they do make it. I don't think that any of the teams after TL, FlyQuest, or Golden Guardians and C9, pardon me, I don't think any of the other teams are looking amazing right now. And I think that Dig is better than the record shows, and I wouldn't be surprised to see an upset. So I think they might win one series in the playoffs, but I don't have them going too far. So I think their story ends early on in the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely agree. I have them 6-12. They make playoffs in the bottom bracket, and I'd have them losing in the first round.
Yeah, 6-12 is what I have as well. Anything else before we move on to 100?
Nope.
So 100 Thieves is next up on the list. I had a hard time predicting some of the games for them. So I had them finishing 5-13 or 6-12, and I have them in the 8th spot there. Their next games are against FlyQuest, Immortals, Dignitas, and Evil Geniuses.
Yeah, I have them 6-12, and you said you had them either that or 5-13. I have them 6-12, tied seventh with Dignitas, and them and Dignitas. If I'm predicting Dignitas to beat 100T in their most recent matchup that's coming up. So that would put them at 1-1 in the head-to-head record. And I was just looking up the tiebreaker rules before the stream started here, before the episode started, and they're confusing. I don't exactly know how the tiebreakers work. If they have a 1-1 head-to-head record, there's something like with strength of schedule in terms of the teams that you beat. So there, I have them tied at seventh. 100 Thieves, they've kind of felt like they're just a team that's there. They're not super impactful. I think, they beat C9, which was pretty impressive in that specific game. But other than that, we haven't really seen much from them with their new roster with contracts and Poom. And for me, they kind of just get in because they won some games. There's not much to say from on my end about this team. I just think this team, I was just talking with Dignitas. Dignitas has an identity. There's no identity with this team. Like sometimes he's playing carries, sometimes he's stuck on the sleeper tank picks, contracts. Sometimes he's popping off playing some sort of aggressive jungler like the Olaf or the Nidalee. Sometimes he's just kind of running it down on the Olaf or the Nidalee. Like I don't want to say they sound coin flip because I don't think they're a coin flip, but they're just there, and they beat the bad teams and they lose to the good teams, and that's kind of a recipe for an early playoff exit.
I would say that when it comes to coin flip, it's a phrase I don't want to throw out too much, but I do think that Contracts kind of does fit that just because his aggressive nature. And that's usually the kind of players that are coin flippy, so to speak, are generally the ones that are very aggressive, right? They go hard and they either come out on top or they don't. Whereas there's some people that are a lot more calculated in their play, and Contracts has been very aggressive. I think he's just starting to get punished a little bit for his aggressive play style, and I think that's why you're maybe well. Also, he doesn't have the same team that Dardoch does with Dignitas. So like, I think it's better for Dardoch to be coin flip than it is Contracts, if that makes any sense. And I think the other area where they're showing a little bit of weakness is, of course, with Poom. Uh, it's showing a little bit his inexperience, but this is something we expected, right? We weren't expecting Poom to enter the league and start popping off and going crazy. This is a guy that was playing solo queue like 8 months ago or something like that. So I'm not disappointed with this team in any way. I just don't think they're very good. I think Someday's still really good, but I think that they're still hurting a little bit in the jungle because like I said, Contracts is coin flip. I think Ryoma's still just getting caught out at random times. But I will say I really have. Well, I also think Poom is getting caught out as well. But I will say that I really have enjoyed Ryoma being on the picks like Galio. I think that his Galio is a lot better. I don't think that Ryoma is a guy that you want to give all your resources to and dump everything into. Like when he was playing a bunch of Azir, I don't think it's the greatest thing. I thought his Azir was okay. Um, but I do like the Galio a lot more. I think it's very good with how Contracts wants to play, which is very go in. So I think they have a play style that works for them. I just think the skill isn't there for them to be a top tier team. And so I have them just squeaking into playoffs, finishing eighth, but I don't have them winning any playoff series. And so I have them exiting very quickly.
Yeah, I think this is another team, kind of how I mentioned with Immortals, that they're building and sort of looking towards next year. I know 100 Thieves, they put a lot of priority in their academy team and in their 100 Next, their sort of trainee team. And just recently we saw Tenacity and Kenvi, Tenacity being the top laner and Kenvi being the jungler for the 100 Thieves Next team. They've both now been brought up to academy from the trainee team. So I think this is a team that's building towards the future, kind of something that we don't really see honestly in esports, specifically in league. Like we see a lot of teams signing import players, signing veteran players, and trying to make a playoff push. And I think I'm really interested to see the future of 100 Thieves because it seems like they're taking a little bit more of a traditional sports approach in terms of we're gonna wait, we're gonna build, and we're gonna be successful in the future. And I think I'm hopeful to see where this team can go in the future.
Yeah, for sure. I think 100 Thieves fans have something to be excited about. You can have trust in their management. That's not something you could say with every team in this league. I trust Papa Smithy. I think he's the perfect guy to kind of get this team back on track. Him joining 100 Thieves this year, he was kind of given a budget, and so like he wasn't given the best of tools to go out and spend a bunch of money and get all these great players. And I think that what he has set up with the farm system, so to speak, has been very good. And like I said, 100 Thieves fans, they have a reason to be excited for the future of this team. Just not this year, so I think it's an early exit. Anything else before we move on to CLG?
Nah, nada.
All right, so CLG, I have them finishing 5-13. I have them missing playoffs, which is absolutely crazy, despite the 4-2 start that they had to the split.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. I got them going 5-13, missing playoffs, being the ninth place team, and just looking at their schedule. I don't think there's anybody who'd be predicting to for CLG to get a win. They have TL, FlyQuest, Golden Guardians, and C9. So what you could argue are all playoff teams in the top six.
I would
Um,
say those are the four best teams right now. The way teams are playing right now, I think those are the four best teams, and I think CLG is in tough for the next 2 weeks.
yeah, it's we've talked a lot about CLG on the show in terms of, we're both of the opinion that even though CLG was picking up wins early on in the season, we both really weren't impressed. One with their wins and two the level of play that was going on in those wins. I've sort of talked about it from the standpoint of there's sort of been two halves to this split in terms of rosters. You had the old Dig roster, the old Immortals roster, the old 100 Thieves roster, and three of those wins CLG picked up on all those old rosters. And you know, we just mentioned they have a very hard schedule coming up, and they haven't managed to pick up a win in these past couple weeks, even though it's been an easy schedule for them. They played Immortals, they played 100T, they played Dignitas, and lost to all those teams in those rematches. So this team, it's got a lot of work to do. I think we're both of the opinion that we don't like Wiggly, we don't like their top side of the map and Rune and Wiggly, and Weldon, that guy, he's got a I don't know, that guy's in he's off in like Candyland or some shit like that.
And I don't even think that's necessarily Weldon's fault. I think whoever hired Weldon as your coach, that's a problem. This guy is clearly a sports psychologist. How about you hire him to be your sports psychologist? Like, to me, it's crazy that this guy's a head coach. And yes, they have Coach Song there, but I can't imagine what it's like to be on a losing streak and have to go into the VOD review room with your team and get an earful from fucking Weldon telling you how you fucked up this game. Like, that to me is like, if you're not already tilted, now you're double tilted, you know? So that's crazy. This team hasn't won a game since that massive throw that EG just gifted to them.
Yeah,
That's the
oh my
last win this
God.
team has. And before that, they don't have a win since week 3. Like, everything is going wrong for this team, and they came into the split with a couple of wins over some bad teams, and they were all like, "Oh, no one's giving us the credit we deserve for our wins." That's because there's
Rightly
not a lot of
so.
credit to give. Like, we're looking at your numbers, we're looking at how the games go. None of your games look clean. You look bad. So, you're bad. Like, it's that simple for me. And I feel so bad for CLG fans. I want to cheer for this team, but I can't cheer for CLG. I've said this 1,000 times. I can't cheer for this team until they change their management and their coaching staff. Because I think with that, changing their management and their coaching staff, they will also change their top side of the map. And to be clear, we've given a lot of leeway to Pobelter, but he didn't exactly look too great this weekend either, and neither did the bot lane. So it's like, to me, the whole map is looking bad from top to bottom. There's not much going on for this team. I don't see how they're going to get a win in the rest of their games here up against what I think are currently the best four teams in the league. Monka S, this team, I have them missing playoffs, going ninth, and yeah, I don't really got much else to say on this team. I think Ruin needs to work on his Gnar.
Yeah, I don't got too much else to say. I think this is a team that, honestly, they're going to be in a bit of a hole going forward into the next season because I'd be very, very, very surprised if there weren't any major changes in terms of both roster and management going forward for 2021. And then you're gonna have to go through like another experimental period with a new roster, a new coaching staff, and you then gotta hope that that iteration of your roster and your organization works out, and or else you're going to be in the same place that you were right now, and you're going to be like looking for a massive rebuild. And I don't see any promising players on CLG's academy team that they can kind of just plug in for the next season. I don't exactly know, their academy team's record, but in terms of notable academy players, I don't think there's anybody coming out of the CLG squad. So
Not really. They got Deus, they got Fragus, Tuesday, and then Wind and Phil.
yeah,
Eh.
and I think and a lot of those names have actually been in academy for quite a while. Thanks for saying that. I know we saw Deus in 1 week and he looked really bad. Fragus
I
is
didn't feel though. I gotta say, I didn't feel like he got a fair chance, man. He was hard camped. He was given no help whatsoever from Wiggly. But you are absolutely right. That guy got stomped.
Yeah, and I know Fragus, Tuesday, and Phil have all been in academy for I think the better part of like at least 2 to 3 years. And
These are
Wind,
names that have been around for a while.
yeah,
That's the
Wind.
point.
I know he's fairly. I think he's only been in academy for a year. Wind, maybe like a year and a half. But yeah, there's no reason to get
He played some
excited.
games last split. He played some games in spring. Just wasn't much doing. I mean, it was. Don't get me wrong. I don't think adding Win to your lineup is gonna turn last split CLG into a winning team. But yeah, they gave him a game or two. I remember.
But yeah, there's not a huge reason to get excited for this team, and they're going to be in a bit of a limbo, I think, going forward to next year.
Yeah, and the last thing that I'll say on this team is that okay, if I'm a CLG fan and
I'm jumping
management
ship.
doesn't change. Yeah, and management doesn't change, and coaching doesn't change, and the players don't change for next split. See ya. Take care. Comb your hair. I'm going somewhere else. I don't even know where. Any other team. Any other team. Like, I feel really bad for CLG fans because there are some that have been fans since season 1, 2, whatever it was when CLG started, and they're hanging on, but they're mauling right now. Like, trying to watch their team. It's really sad. So, yeah, I don't got anything else to say on CLG. You want to move on to Golden Guardians?
Yeah, they kind of feel like at their current point, they kind of feel like the Cleveland Browns of
Oh
LCS.
yes, yes. That hit me a little too close. That feels accurate.
Yeah.
Next up on the list, we got Golden Guardians. This team is looking better. I'm excited for this team. I'm glad we get to talk about these guys now because it was pretty lurky starting off with all the bottom tier teams. This is a team to be excited about, and I'm very excited about this team. I have them finishing fifth. I think this is the first split that they're going to finish above 500. I have them finishing 10-8 or 9-9, but I think the 10-8 is more likely. So 10-8 for me, fifth place, and I think they could win a couple of games in the playoffs. What do you think?
Yeah, for me, I got 9-9, finishing in fifth place. Just for their upcoming games are C9, CLG, TSM, and EG. CLG's a free win, and I think in terms of the other three games, they're pretty close games. I think the majority of people are going to take C9 over them, so that puts them 1-1. And in terms of EG and TSM, I would have them losing to TSM and beating EG. Although I feel like with three of those games, I wouldn't be surprised with any outcome. Like them, if they were to
That's a
beat
good point.
C9 or if they were to lose to TSM or beat TSM or lose to EG or beat EG, there's not any real outcome that I would be super surprised with. The only one would be is if they lost to CLG, which would be what the
Which
fuck is
they
going
did
on.
do to start the split. Let's remember that. They somehow did.
Yeah, they
We're seeing a different team now, though.
yeah,
Let's
this
be
this
honest.
this
We're
is
seeing a different Golden Guardians. They
this
look
is
good right now.
yeah, I've really been enjoying. We've been talking them up, I think, in the last couple episodes, mainly because we really enjoy their drafts and how they mirror a little bit what C9 does in terms of playing around closer. But I have them 9-9, dropping to TSM. I know if you're going to take the 10-8, that would have them beating TSM.
Yep.
But I think this is a team where it's really for me. This team is really dependent on the draft. I think I really like it of the recently what they've been doing with Hanser, putting him on the Kennen, and I know they put him on the Kale in one game into the Ornn. But I've really been liking their top in terms of their drafting and Closer as well. They're still doing the same old thing with Closer, putting him on a carry jungler, giving him some support, whether or not that's through the top lane, it's like a Karma top, or like a Yumi or Karma bottom. I'm really liking what I'm seeing out of their drafts. I think they've been playing really, really well, and it's a little bit unfortunate that they had such a slow start to the season because I think this could have been a team that may be battling for like even a third place spot if they hadn't, dropped so many games at the start.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Like this is a team that would be up there battling for that kind of spot. I think. I think I would still have FlyQuest above them, but I would probably have them finishing fourth if it weren't for their weak start. You mentioned Hanser playing the Kennen and the Kale. I really like that, and I just like how flexible this guy is. He's played 10 different champs in 14 games. That's pretty damn good, and I think he's looked respectable on just about all of them. Maybe with a couple exceptions. Maybe somebody could correct me on that. Maybe he's like winless on a certain champion or running it down, but I don't think he has been. There's nothing that I can remember. And I want to talk a little bit more about why you mentioned we're hyping up this team, and I want to talk about why a little bit more. I want to dive into more closely to the bot lane because we saw them pull up some graphics this week on the LCS broadcast about how FBI is in first place in so many statistics and in second in so many others. The best one for me is, or the best two for me, are his DPM and his CSD at 15. So for those that don't know, he's first place in his role for both of those. He's first place in damage per minute at 617, and he's first in CSD at 15. plus 12. And that's a pretty significant gap there. And when you give credit to the AD carry, I think you also have to give credit to the support. And we, not even just us, I think the community in general was pretty harsh on Huhi for a while. He's looked pretty damn good. I have to say he's looked a lot better going towards the end of the split than he did at the start of the split. And that could be one of the biggest reasons why we saw them struggle to start and why they're starting to look so good now. So I'm really happy with their bot lane and really excited to see what they do for the rest. And I got to talk about closer. This guy is back on. He's putting the carry pants back on. This is a jungle that you could feel good giving resources. And I don't think there's a lot of those junglers in the league, in the LCS. He's looked great, especially this past weekend as Olaf was running everybody down. I do think that the draft was troll. I don't know how Golden Guardians were given all of those picks, but their draft was great. Anything that they were given, they took. And so they've looked really good. I'm really excited for this team. I want to see them win a playoff series, and I think they can.
Yeah, just to go back to Huhi, I've really liked what they've done in terms of draft and switching up sort of his role within the team. He was playing a lot of Thresh and sort of various peely sort of supports. He's playing Nautilus, he's playing Thresh, and kind of just playing like protect the FBI. But he sort of
Tom
transitioned.
Kench. He
Yeah,
was playing Tom Kench.
Tom Kench as well. He's sort of been playing. Not the majority of his role in his champion was to protect FBI, but he's been on a little bit more playmakers now. He's been playing a lot of Set, been playing some Bard, and I really like that sort of transition that they've done with him. I think him and Zazel are kind of the only two that are really playing Set support right now. I know that champion's actually due for another nerf because that champion is really OP. But they're really adopting the Set support. I know a lot of people are playing Set jungle, which I don't like, but we're gonna might get into that a little bit later. But I'm really liking the Set support from Huhi. I'm loving the champions that he's picking, and their draft is primarily the reason why I'm enjoying this team so much.
Yeah, I'm with you. I thought specifically with the Set, I really enjoyed watching who he plays Set. I want to see some more of it. I don't agree with you about the Set in the jungle, mostly just because of FlyQuest and how good Santorin's
Set
looked on that.
jungle's
But
dog.
we'll get to that in a little bit. I don't really have much else to say about this team. I'm really excited for them. I think they'll do well. I don't think they're going to go to Worlds, sadly. I need to preface that. Even though I think they can make a decent playoff run, I don't think they're top 3, but I don't think they're far. And so Golden Guardian fans finally have something to be excited about. I think this is the best iteration of the Golden Guardians that we've ever seen.
Big agree.
Big agree out of JNT. Okay, next up we got Evil Geniuses. So Evil Geniuses has kind of had a little bit of a roller coaster season. What do you think about EG?
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. This is the second week that we've now seen the Golden Glue and Huni roster as opposed to the Kumo and Jizuke roster.
Yep.
And it was a bit underwhelming. That would be the word I would use in terms of this week and compared to their previous week when they took down C9. But I don't know. It's been weird. For me personally, I think the better roster was the Jizuke Kumo roster. But I think a lot of their problems could be attributed to part of their draft in terms of why they were losing a lot of those games. They had a really poor draft against the first time they played C9 and various other games when they had Jizuke playing like the Karma mid and not having him on a carry, and they had him on the AP Cog mid, which understandably it's a carry, and that's Jizuke's role is to carry, but it's not necessarily the style of champion that I like to see him on. But I have them finishing 8 and 10, going sixth place. Their next upcoming games are TSM, FlyQuest, Golden Guardians, and 100T. And for me, that would mean I would have them losing to TSM, FlyQuest, and Golden Guardians and beating 100 Thieves, so going 1-3 in their last 4 games.
Yeah, so I have them coming in at 6th place. I have them finishing either 9-9 or 8-10. I want to talk a little bit more about Golden Glue a little bit because I can't believe I'm saying this about a player like Golden Glue who's been around forever, but I want to see more before I have an opinion. I shouldn't have to say that, but I do. Like, that's how I feel. Like, I thought the Zoe bubbles were great, especially against C9. He looked really good. And then there's some games where he's just getting caught out, kind of Ryoma-esque a little bit there. So, like, I actually want to see more Golden Glue. Who thought that I would be saying that, man? I still am pretty excited for him, but I do think even though Jizuke had some rough games, I think Jizuke is the better mid. And I think that there must have had to have been something going wrong, maybe some mental boom. I can't really say for sure because I'm not in that org. But to me, it doesn't really make sense that Jizuke is sitting. I don't think that Huni is that great of an upgrade over Kumo. Kumo also had a couple of rough games, but he had a really good start to the split. And he's a player that I would like to see more of too. You kind of know what you're getting with Hooney. You're getting some aggression. And usually with Hooney, you also have to give him all your resources too, which we talked about what happens when you give an aggressive player resources. They're coin flippy, and that's kind of what Hooney has been for quite a while now. And I think there's always people are so quick to praise Hooney when he pops off, but I think if we do that, I think we also have to kind of flame a little bit when he does run it down. There was his interview with Travis after them beating C9 was, oh, don't let anybody or don't let me pick my GP or you'll lose. This is a guy that got smashed in lane against Licorice with his GP. So like I didn't think that he really had any rights to brag about that. But I mean, he did, and that's Hooney style. He's very much he's got a lot to say. I'm not too excited for this team though. I'm really cold on them at the moment, and I don't see them really going far in playoffs. Like I said, I think they'll finish in the 6th spot for the regular season, but I don't have them winning any playoff series because if they do finish 6th, they have to play a 3rd seed in the winners bracket. I think they'll go immediately to the lower bracket. And I think that there's a chance that they get a pretty early exit.
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty disappointed, honestly, in EG in terms of their game against Dignitas. I know although I want to say I was really impressed with Dig, specifically Afro, and we already talked about that before in his Blitzcrank. But EG, they kind of like it felt like they kind of like lost control of the car, like in the middle of the game. Like one thing sort of went wrong, and then they just didn't really know what to do thereafter. Hooney was actually, I think he was playing pretty well on the Camille in terms of his split pushing. He was beating down Viper in lane. He was up 2 kills early on in the game and had a pretty good split push going. I think he got tier towers in both top lane and bot lane. And then sort of once they didn't really know what to do, like it kind of just fizzled out, and they like kind of they just really lost the game pretty swiftly. So I wasn't too impressed with EG this week in terms of the games that they played. I think I would have more confidence in this team if they would have been able to transition that big early lead that they got on Dignitas into a clean win. However, they didn't, and it's kind of sticking out like a sore thumb in my mind right now. God, I can't speak today. But yeah, I don't know. I'm a little cold on them as well, and we kind of have to see how they perform in these last couple games. They have a bit of a tough schedule, and if they're able to pick up some wins against these decent teams, then maybe that gives us reason to think that they might have a potential playoff push.
Yeah, so even though like both of us are kind of cold on this team, I do think that there's definitely some good things that you can see out of this out of Evil Geniuses right now, especially their bot lane. I think Bangs looked good, and we've talked about Zazel last week. I think we talked about him on his Alistair, but he got it again, and he looks good on the Alistair. So that's a must ban. I think that you could be, if you're an EG fan, you could definitely be happy with the bot lane. I'm a little bit cold on Svenskeren, and it's not because I think he's been awful. But he hasn't been the level of MVP that we saw just a year ago. It felt like he fell off a little bit. But I don't think he's awful, and I do think that EG fans do have some hope there. I think that Svenskeren is a good jungler, so you have that. You have a good bot lane. It's just about trying to get your mid and your top more comfortable with the team. And let's be honest, these guys haven't been scrimming for a long time, so there is a chance that EG turns it around with this roster and start to look good, and maybe they make a playoff push. So even though I'm not optimistic for this team, you can't write this team off. They still have a chance to make some good things happen in the playoffs.
Yeah, I definitely think they have the individual talent to play up to the level of these top tier teams. It's just kind of a matter of getting their drafts right and figuring out what they want to do in the game and, focusing on their game plan and sticking to it.
Yeah. Anything else before we move on to FlyQuest?
Hashtag live evil.
Yeah, hashtag live evil. All right, hashtag live good. That doesn't sound right. But anyways, we went from
What
evil
was that?
to team
What
good.
was that supposed to
You
mean?
don't know the good versus evil, the little storyline that they've been pushing all. FlyQuest is the good team. Evil Geniuses are the bad team.
I thought FlyQuest was like Sequest and the fish
I mean,
stuff.
yeah, but
But
they've
they're
always every time they play each other, it's always good versus evil.
Oh, no, I haven't
Yeah.
seen that.
Oh, you're out of the loop, man. Anyways,
I need to get
FlyQuest.
in the loop.
Let's fucking go, FlyQuest. I am fired up on this team. For those that don't know, I'm definitely a FlyQuest fan. I love this team. I'm really happy with how they looked this past weekend. I have them winning out the rest of the season. So maybe I'm a little bit too optimistic, but I don't think their schedule is that difficult. They got 100 Thieves, EG, CLG, and IMT. So they got a pretty easy schedule. And if they do win out, they finish 12-6. That is a good record. I have this team finishing third. I think that this team is actually going to go to Worlds. There, I said it. I think FlyQuest is going to be the third seed going to Worlds, which I also want to say I wouldn't be surprised if they're the second seed, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think TL will still be the second seed. I have FlyQuest going to Worlds. I don't have them getting out of groups, though. I don't think they're there yet. I do want to make everyone kind of recall what happened last time Ignar was at Worlds, though, with his Leona on Misfits. He looked pretty damn good, and he was able to pull out some wins for Misfits at Worlds. I think that was season 7. Was that season
Yep,
7?
2017.
Yeah, so this isn't a team without any Worlds experience. And Santorin played for
PoE was also
TSM
on that
some years.
team, remember?
Who was, sorry?
PoE was on that Misfits team.
Yeah, and I was just about to talk about PoE, and so PoE's also playing for Misfits, and he's been looking great too. There's not any lack of experience on the world scale, so I actually wouldn't be surprised if this team makes it out of groups, but I don't think they're good enough yet. I still think that Turtle's not exactly world's caliber, and I don't think Solo is exactly world's caliber, despite them being decent, like good players, like solid players, as far as LCS standards are concerned. Where do you think this team's gonna end their story?
I'm in the same boat with you for them winning out the season and them being a strong team, but I
Uh-oh.
unfortunately
Don't
don't
say
have
it.
them making Worlds.
No, man. All
But
right, who's
yeah,
making worlds?
well, we'll get to that, but you can kind of
Okay.
infer based on all the teams we've discussed so far.
Yeah.
But it's not that I don't have confidence in this team. It's that I think I have a little bit more confidence in the other teams. And I know it's a little bit like hard to say with TSM's recent performances and the way they look, but I still think this is a very strong team, and I would not be surprised at all if this was the third place team because I do think they have been playing at a pretty high quality level, specifically Santorin, Power of Evil, and Ignar. I think those are their three best their three best players. They're really, really strong players, but the problem that I have with FlyQuest is specifically, and I'm not, well, I don't, when Santorin goes up against early and aggressive junglers, he seems to struggle a lot. And I don't want to, I don't think that makes him a bad jungler. I just think that his playstyle doesn't really fit, like his playstyle doesn't match well when he's really getting invaded by another player. I think in both C9s, Santorin got kind of like heavily exposed and just not necessarily he got exposed, but they got exposed through the jungle role in both of those games that they played against
Hmm.
C9. And, you know, when mid jungle is the most important, position in the game, specifically, I think jungle is the most important role in the game right now. You're really going to get exposed by these, higher level teams. So I don't think FlyQuest is a bad team at all. And like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if this team makes Worlds. But I do think there's sort of a recipe on how to beat this team.
Yeah. And so I don't. I can see where you're coming from there. I still think Santorin's been freaking great though,
I,
and
I
we
think
gotta
I think
talk.
he has been too. I'm not
uh,
saying that. I just
He
think this
so
in this one scenario he's a bit
yeah.
lacking.
Yeah, and that's fair. I do want to mention that he was MVP for this past week. So hats off to him for that. And we got to talk a little bit about Set Jungle here because I know you mentioned earlier that you're not a huge fan of the Set Jungle. I think he looks really good on Set Jungle. So I don't even care about Set Jungle specifically, but I do like Santorin's Set Jungle. So I think he's looked really, really good. He showed that this past weekend. And I do agree that he has looked rough when being pressured early on. But I do think that some of those losses were kind of cheesy. And sure, cheese is part of the game, but I don't think cheese is something that can be repeated all that often. And so I'm not too worried about that. I think he's looked great. I think, like you said, the three players being Santorin, PoE, and Ignar are definitely the players that carry this team. I think they will do that, and I think that's those three players are the reason why they're going to go to Worlds. Specifically, I want to talk a little bit about Ignar. We see every game against FlyQuest, Pantheon is banned, or they play it. Um, and if not, he gets Rakan. And these are great champions that he can engage with, and he's shown success on both. And so you have two solid picks that you have to ban out this guy that leaves so much open for the other team to take. And so just in pick ban, you've already got that advantage from the support there.
Yeah, I think we've sort of seen Zaya Rakan die off as like a premier bot lane duo, but Ignar really makes Rakan look like a top tier support in the game. And
For
not a lot of
sure.
people are picking Rakan, but this guy makes the Rakan like when you see FlyQuest lock in Rakan, you're like, oh shit, Ignar is most likely going to play very well because it seems like it's his kind of go-to comfort champion. if his Pantheon's banned or they're not trying out some random like Senna bot lane that's farming sort of strategy. But I want to jump back onto the set jungle because while I don't like set jungle and I think it's a bad pick, the way that FlyQuest picked it and played around it specifically in their Golden Guardians game, I think that's an iteration of draft where set jungle actually is good, specifically because it counters the Kennen top. That was the game I'm referring to is the FlyQuest versus Golden Guardians game where Hanser, top laner for GGS, or GG I guess now, was playing Kennen, and basically Santorin's job and only job come late game team fights were to disrupt the Kennen, ultimate of team fights, drag him into him with the set E, and I think the way that he utilized the set jungle in that game specifically was really good, and I think it should be I think set jungle should be more of a like niche pick in that kind of scenario where you have maybe an assassin or these really dive heavy champions to sort of yoink them out of the team fights and just disrupt them as much as possible. So in the case of this week Santorin and playing set jungle against Golden Guardians, I think it was really good, but I don't like set jungle. I think the pick's bad and just like a blind pick. It's not like I don't see it as a good blind pickable champion.
So I do like the points that you made of how it was good into the specific things that they were playing against. And you brought up the FlyQuest versus Golden Guardians game. I want to talk quickly about this game. Not much to say, but I just want to say that this was a very well played game between teams that are not top tier teams in North America. And I think that game specifically is one of the main reasons why I'm so high on them and Golden Guardians right now. That was a game where, of course, there was some errors. There's never going to be a game without any, but for the most part, it was just neck and neck, and it was a very clean game out of both teams. So I think that game specifically is the main reason why I'm hot on both of those teams right now. But yeah, I don't really have too much to add on FlyQuest. Anything on them before we move on to TSM?
Yeah, no, I just, like you said, I think that game specifically, although there were a few mistakes, it was definitely a very high level game in terms of what was going on, the team fighting, the execution. I think both teams were actually playing really well. And, I think I guess, in what pushed them over the edge was honestly the set jungle in that game, just being able to disrupt the cannon because the cannon was the real strong point in Golden Guardians draft. I think he was like he was like 4-0 right at the start of the game, and basically kind of got shut down from thereafter past like 20 to 25 minutes.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. Moving on, we got TSM. I have TSM finishing fourth, and I actually don't have them going as far in playoffs as you may think. I actually have them losing both playoff rounds in the winners bracket and the losers bracket. Um, this team, here's the thing. So all split long, we've kind of given shit to CLG about not looking good in their wins, and the same thing with TL. Like they haven't always looked good in their wins. And if we're going to do that for other teams, I think we need to do this with TSM as well. And I'm really surprised that this team has a 9-5 record right now. I don't think that they're looking all that great. I actually have them finishing either 10-8 or 11-7. Their next four games are Evil Geniuses, Cloud9, Golden Guardians, and Team Liquid. So some pretty tough opponents. Not four. That's not four teams that you want to be playing going into the end of your season. So I do think they have their work cut out for them. I actually think that there's a chance they lose all of those games. But I do think there's also a chance that they win 3 or 4 of them. So this is like really difficult because we don't know what TSM is going to show up that day. The one thing I will say is that even though they've looked bad, which is the reason why I have them not going far in playoffs, I am still worried if I'm playing against them just because of playoff Bjergsen and playoff Doublelift. Like we've seen these guys in playoffs so many times with their playoff montages popping off and hard carrying their team to win. And so I think that if TSM is to make a playoff push, it's going to be through those two veterans that we're talking about always because they do seem to carry when it matters most.
Yeah, I think there's a tiny little bit of recency bias in terms of like TSM's overall level of play and how people perceive them. Obviously, they've lost a few games recently and haven't been looking the best. But you got to remember, like, I feel like this team just has too much talent to fail. And that's kind of why I'm of the opinion that they're going to kind of get their shit together. And I do have this team making Worlds, being the third place team out of NA. But I'm basing a lot of that on them getting their shit together, and as you mentioned, playoff Bjergsen and playoff Doublelift kind of being able to step back up. Um, And like I just said, this team has way too much talent to lose. Like we've seen Broken Blade and what he can do at a high level, and even like at a mid level. Like he's a great player. He's a lane dominant player. He's a carry player. You can play through him. He can play the tanks like Ornn. He 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 can does whatever what needs to be done. It's just in terms of like he's been in a little bit of a slump in terms of his performance. The main concern that I have for this roster, and I think again I wouldn't be surprised if this team kind of just flamed out of the playoffs, would be Spica. I talked a little bit last week about how he kind of got exposed for his inexperience in a couple of their previous games in terms of getting behind early and really not knowing what to do. But yeah, Spica is the main concern that I have for this team. It feels like for Spica, they have to get him on something comfortable, and if he's not on something comfortable, the game is kind of like up in the air. Like I don't really know what's going to happen.
It did seem weird that they had him on the Jarvan this past weekend, and he was just falling really far behind in CS. But to me, that's not the only problem. You mentioned how Broken Blade's been a great player and how he's been able to have good performances on tanks and carries. I think where I differ from you is that, so I do agree with you that he can, but I just don't think he will. He hasn't been looking too good for, I think, most of the split. And Spica, still, I don't know what to think about him exactly. He hasn't looked great lately. That's where I think you could be right as far as the recency bias, because I think he did in the middle of the split. I think he actually looked pretty damn good. So I don't want to say that. I don't want to write him off whatsoever. But yeah, the team just doesn't seem to be clicking. And like I said, a lot of their wins aren't convincing me that they're going to be a winning team. Um, with that said, you said you had them going to Worlds. I want to know, how are they going to do at Worlds?
Yeah, well, I have them making worlds, but that doesn't mean I have them doing well in worlds. I think
Yeah.
this, it's definitely going to be tied to their performances towards the end of the season and playoffs in terms of the confidence that they have. But this is definitely a team that could struggle like at like the play-in tournament, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were to lose at the play-in tournament. I think last year we had Clutch as our third seed in NA, who really struggled in the play-in tournament, going 2-2 in their group stage, and I think maybe their playoff series to get into Worlds was either a 3-1 or a 3-2. I don't think it was a 3-0. I don't think it would have been a 3-0, but I think it was a 3-1. But I think their performance is going to their Worlds performance, because if I have them making Worlds, is really going to be tied to their playoff performances. And like I said, I think this team just has too much talent to lose. Bjergsen and Doublelift, two just perennial all-time greats in terms of NA. Whether or not they continue to roll with Treats and Biofrost, I'm kind of interested to see if, Treats is going to be sticking around for the entirety of the season, or, they might do like sort of a six-man roster moving into playoffs. Um, but yeah, I don't know.
I
It's this team will be interesting to see. They have a bit of a tough schedule, like you mentioned, with EG, C9, Golden Guardians, and Team Liquid. In terms of my predictions, I have them going 12-6 actually, being the fourth seed in
am.
playoffs. Yeah, so in that case, I have them beating EG, Golden Guardians, and Team Liquid. They played Team Liquid in the last game of the season, and if if I'm predicting the script, they're gonna win that game.
I made a prediction, and before the split started on Hotline League, I predicted that TL is going to bounce back, and not only are they going to bounce back, they're going to be better than TSM and 2-0 TSM throughout the split. So I'm going to be cheering for TL in that one. Some pretty bold predictions out of you. One quick thing I want to talk about before moving on to TL. I want to talk about um, what was it? I'm losing my train of thought here. Oh yes, I wanted to talk about a Doublelift and Bjergsen going to Worlds, because these guys have been at Worlds many times. And although I would argue Bjergsen looks pretty damn good right now, like near peak Bjergsen, I would say. I don't think Doublelift looks near peak Doublelift, if that makes sense. And so, if these guys haven't been able to get out of groups in the past, you kind of got to wonder what makes it likely that they're going to make it out of groups this time around, you know? So that's where, if they do go to Worlds, I don't think I got them going very far either. I don't think they'll make it out. And I agree with you that there's a chance that they struggle just getting into the play-in area. But I don't have too much else to say. I guess I just one other small little thing is their game against CLG this past weekend. I think if that game is against any other team with the same draft, I think TSM loses that game. I think that they should have lost to CLG. Just CLG can't pull the trigger on anything ever for some reason. I don't know. And they had an opportunity to get a fight, a really good fight, and CLG didn't take it, and that's why TSM was able to kind of regroup after they had got caught and kind of just closed out the game with CLG just being a little bit too much of pansies to do anything.
Yeah, not
Uh,
not not to like harp on CLG again, but like Ruins. Oh man, we were watching the game and Ruins Gnar barn management. Like one of our friends, Tommy, he plays a lot of Gnar, and like he said it himself. Like his Gnar barn management was like the worst thing he's ever seen. Like that guy at the start of every single team fight was zero rage on Gnar. Like whenever a team fight was breaking out, he was either Mega Gnar with like 10 rage left, or he was Mini Gnar and it just like de-transformed. And like if Ruin actually knew what he was doing and was playing the video game, I think you're right, and that CLG probably wins that game. But like,
but there's
God,
also even
CLG
the
looked so bad in that game, specifically
yeah,
Ruin.
and there was even the fight though where Ruin had the Gnar and he could have flash engaged on TSM. Remember, Doublelift was poked out heavily right at
Yeah,
Dragon. He had like maybe 5% HP. Like he was one hit and he was dead. Like that's the time to go for a fight. And CLG settled for taking the Dragon away from TSM, gave TSM the chance to regroup, and then TSM just closed out the game. So like
yeah,
that's the kind of game that I'm talking about where I say like TSM hasn't looked good in their wins. And remember the last time they played CLG? That was the time where Freak had the hard flame CLG for their decision making. Like both of their wins against CLG could be losses. And I think we've said so much about what we think about CLG on this show. If TSM struggles twice to beat CLG, I think that goes to show just how good TSM really is. But again, don't want to harp too much on CLG. We do plenty of that on this show.
yeah.
God damn.
We do that on a weekly basis.
Yeah, we got a shit ton of things to throw at CLG. Kind of feels bad, honestly, but I mean, it's just speaking some truth. Anything else before we move on to TL?
I'm trying to think of like a Twitter thing that TSM does, or like a fuck it, Bay Life. Next one.
All right, TL. They beat C9 this weekend, as we talked about earlier. Really interesting game. I don't want to talk too much about the things that we've already talked about, but I do want to talk about how this team has a chance to finish first now, and I actually have them being tied for first place when the end of the regular season comes around. Listen to their opponents that they play. They have Dignitas, CLG, Immortals, and TSM. I have them winning all of those games. So I actually think that they're going to finish their split 15-3, which to me is like so far above where they should actually be. I maybe not so far above, but above where they should actually be. I think they're a good team. I don't think they're a 15-3 team, but it looks like that's where they're maybe going to finish. And I think you have to, if you're talking about this team being this good, you have to talk about Core JJ. This guy is going to be an MVP candidate. You mentioned to me over this weekend that his last game against C9, where he pretty much 1v9'd, might be the reason that pushes him above Blabber in that MVP voting. While I don't exactly agree, I do think that there's a little bit of recency bias. I don't think that Core JJ was that great at the beginning of the split, which Blabber absolutely was. Regardless, if you're arguing for Core JJ to be MVP, I'm there with you. I could see that argument. He's looked amazing, and I'm really, really happy to see him popping off after having a pretty lackluster spring split.
Yeah. We just talked about it with TSM, but I have them going 3-1 in those last 4 games that we mentioned, being CLG, Dig, and Immortals. Those are 3 pretty free games in terms of TL, and their last game being against TSM. And like I said, if I'm predicting the script, TSM will win that game. So I have them going 14-4, being the second seed. And yeah, I mean, there's not much else to already talk about with this team. Like I was saying it over this weekend. Like if the season were to end right now, I think Core JJ would be the MVP, just because I think he's more like it. And I guess it's a little bit of recency bias in terms of his games are going to stick out more in terms of like the voting.
I mean, they have stuck out. These have been good
Yeah,
games,
like
but yeah.
honestly, he's Core JJ. Like if you were to insert like an average or even an above average support in Core JJ's position, I think this team is still much worse. Like this guy is by far and away,
That's true.
like by the definition of MVP, of most valuable player, I think it's Core JJ 100%. Like if I were to actually have like voting powers and giving like votes in this shit, like I would vote for Core JJ. As much as I love Blabber and as well as I think he has been playing throughout the majority of the split, I think I'd have to give it to Core JJ, just purely his like he's carrying as a support, and I think that's something that we rarely see in today's game of League, when supports are so, I don't want to say like cut and dry, because I don't think the support role is, but in terms of what you're doing playing support, like this guy is just on another level with what he's doing.
Yeah, and if you're talking about TL's success, another player you got to talk about is Jensen. He's
Yeah.
been great. They're starting to see him diversify just a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. I mentioned this many times. I wanted to see him on something other than Azir. He played a lot of TF, but that's just being banned out like crazy right now. And now we've seen his Syndra and his Zoe both have been pretty good. So Jensen definitely. I don't think he'll be in the MVP talks. I think that's definitely just a Blabber versus Core JJ race right now. Um, but definitely someone that's up there as far as skill level and maybe in talks for first team All Pro, maybe second. I would put him second, but he's definitely been good. And just a stat, he is first in his role as CSD at 15 at plus 10. So there's something there. We know that Niski's not the kind of guy to be in lane dominant. He's more of a roamer. So I think that uh, so-called lane kingdom, so to speak, immediately goes to Jensen just for that stat and just for how much he's kind of just smashing everyone in the mid lane. Um, I'm trying to think what else. Oh yes, I wanted to talk about this team, how they're going to do at Worlds. So I have them as the second seed going to Worlds. I would not be surprised if they don't make it out of group. And the reason for that is we've seen what happens when teams play slow at Worlds. It just doesn't seem to be the right thing for success at Worlds, and I don't see them changing their play style enough anytime soon. So I think their slow play style, I think they'll just fall behind teams that are aggressive and just flat out better than they are. So I don't have them getting out of groups either, just like FlyQuest. I think that our 2 and 3 seed from NA this year aren't really going anywhere once they make it to Worlds.
Yeah, I have them. If I were to make a prediction right now, I have them losing in groups. But I think something that I find super interesting with this team is how the jungle meta will affect this team. Because I think when Worlds comes around, we can perceive and think and predict what the meta is going to be when Worlds hits. But like it's all up for grabs when Worlds actually starts and the scrim meta in Worlds kind of like starts and evolves because
Mm-hmm.
we see picks kind of come out of nowhere that like we didn't think were on the radar and then Worlds comes around and all these OP picks that we thought were good just aren't so good. Like the main thing that sticks out in my mind is Kai'Sa at season 8 Worlds. Like that champ was kind of viewed as like one of the best champions in the game and it kind of just turned into one of the worst performing champions at Worlds in terms of record. But I think, I for those if any viewers, I gave a shout out to our podcast on Hotline League, but one of the things that really sticks out for me on Team Liquid is Broxa and sort of his recent performances, because I'm of the opinion that he's actually the worst performing player on Team Liquid, and I think that he potentially, depending on how the meta evolves, if the meta is going to continue to be these Graves and the Trundles and the set jungles, if it keeps, popping up, I don't think that really fits Brox's playstyle at all. I like to see him more on the things like the Lee Sin. I know he's actually a really good tank jungle player. He's a good Karthus player if Karthus ever pops back up into meta. But I think the jungle meta will really heavily affect this team because of the importance of the role in international competition. And like I said, if things continue to go how it is, and like you said, with them playing slow, and we kind of see like teams that play slow at Worlds naturally don't do as well because these Chinese and Korean teams, and even now the European teams, like they're gonna take it to you in the early game. They're gonna make you fight and fight often.
Yeah, I completely agree. Pretty much everything you said there, I would just echo. So I'm not going to repeat it. I agree with just about everything you said. The only thing that I think you may have left out, or maybe this is just my opinion, but I don't think Brox is the only thing holding this team back. I think it's also Impact when he's not on tanks, and I've made that very clear. I think that Impact has been great on tanks. I think he's been lackluster when he's not. And that's something we've been talking about Impact for years now. I don't think he's an awful player, but I don't think he's good enough to really have a big enough impact pun at Worlds when the time comes. So yeah, I don't got them moving anywhere past groups.
I
Uh,
mean, just in terms of impact, I think I feel like people are always kind of that similar opinion that like, oh, Impact hasn't been performing like to his normal standards, or he hasn't been performing the best, and people question whether or not he's going to hold up against the other top laners at Worlds. And pretty much in almost every season that people bring up that question, he's solid at Worlds. And so, in terms of impact and moving towards Worlds, like I'm not worried about him at all. I don't have any reason to worry based on previous results, and you know yeah, that's I'm not
yeah,
worried about
that's
impact.
a good point. Oh, you got a
Oh,
little robot
yeah, I
there. I don't
know.
know if
I
that was.
think I think internet went poop for a sec or
Just had a
something
little
happened.
lag spike. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think it's a very good point to reference the past Worlds performances. But yeah, again, not really much else to add. We good to move on to C9, our last team?
Yeah.
So C9, I have them also finishing out the rest of their split with all wins at 15-3. Now, this team has shown that they're willing to try some stuff. However, now that they're tied for first place, I don't think you can afford to give up that first seed. I think they really, really want it. Maybe you can. I don't know how much they value the first versus the second seed, but I think they want to win. And I don't think that you're going to see a lot of too many crazy drafts anymore. Maybe you do. I hope to be proved wrong because I think it's really fun to watch. But I still think this is the best team in North America. I do have them winning the LCS summer split. Actually, I should mention I have them winning over TL in the finals. So I should have mentioned before that I think TL is going to make it to the finals. Cloud9, I think, is just going to win out. I really like the way this team looks, and I think that I've talked about this before. They are playing to the NA advantage, and so what I mean by that, and what I've said before, is playing in NA. There's always talk about how there's a disadvantage because the opponents you're playing are lower skill level, and therefore you don't get that world's level of practice that you would in Europe, LCK, or in China. That's true, but where they do have an advantage is that they're able to pull out these comps and kind of get some practice with it and still feel comfortable knowing that they will make it to Worlds, where I don't think you can do that in other regions. You can't just start whipping out random comps and then lose a bunch of games and then you might not even make it to Worlds. I think Cloud9 can do that, and I think that's what they are doing. So I'm really excited for what this team has to offer once they have their whole portfolio kind of built up, because I think that's what they're doing. They're building up a portfolio, and they will be our number one seed coming out of NA, I think. And this might be a little bit optimistic, so feel free to flame, but I actually have them making to semis again, which they did in the past. I think they're going to make it to semis at Worlds. I think they'll have a pretty good run just because of their flexibility and their like absolutely great work ethic. You hear about all the time how they're always grinding, always looking for that little edge, willing to play different play styles, willing to play different champions. I think that that's the kind of package that you want heading into Worlds and a Worlds run. And I think that C9's really set up to go on a good Worlds run. So I think that they'll make it to semis. I don't think they'll surpass their own personal best from a couple years ago when they made it to semis.
Yeah, I'm definitely agree with you in terms of how you say the NA advantage in terms of being able to, once you have such, I guess, a big lead in the regular season, being able to try out some different drafts and playing towards not necessarily winning games in the regular season, but, expanding your portfolio in terms of champions and drafts that you are able to whip out when playoff comes around in a 5-game series, because, in a 5-game series, you have to adapt to certain champions that just popular or that get popular through the playoff patches, or champions that get popularized even just during in a 5-game series. Draft will always change over a 5-game series, so I definitely think C9 has an advantage there. But something recently that just came out today actually was in Travis Gafford video that he did an interview with Sven, was they were saying that C9 no longer scrims with TSM and Flyquest, which I thought was super interesting, mainly because he was kind of speculating that maybe it was because they were dogging them so much in scrims that they didn't feel like playing C9 was good enough practice in terms of, if they're just getting dominated in lanes, like there's not too much they can learn from the game if they're just getting shit on in lanes. So I found it super interesting that they weren't getting scrim time with TSM and FlyQuest, and I'm kind of surprised on those teams' side that they don't want to scrim C9, because I think you always want to be scrimming the best teams. So I think for C9 it can be a bit of a disadvantage that they're no longer scrimming TSM and FlyQuest. FlyQuest, I think just last week we were kind of putting this team on the just chillin' in terms of where we ranked them, if they were, moving up, moving down, or if they were just chilling. But now FlyQuest, they had a really good weekend, a great 2-0 weekend against two
They're
good
moving up
teams.
now.
They moving up, but they had a great weekend against 2-0 teams, and it's kind of, I guess, disheartening as a C9 fan that they're not going to be scrimming, one of the best teams in the region. And I think scrims against TSM are also very valuable just because they're TSM, they have good players, and you can definitely learn a lot from good players.
Yeah, and Sven said that he's disappointed that he's not going to be able to play those teams. He did say that you want to play the better teams in your region. As long as you're not a bottom tier team, you want to play the highest tier that you can possibly play, because that's the best practice. I also want to clarify that he did say that he wasn't sure if it was a Cloud9 thing not wanting to scrim those teams, or if it was those teams not wanting to scrim Cloud9. So he wasn't too sure. He said he was pretty sure that it was the other teams not wanting to scrim Cloud9.
Yeah.
And
He didn't specifically say, but I think we
right.
kind of inferred it a little bit.
Yeah, and I think maybe the reason for it is because maybe they're drafting, Shen, uh, the Hecarim, the Set Mid, the Lux. Maybe they're drafting like crazy comps right now where they're trying a bunch of different things, and other teams are saying, you know what? Maybe there is value in practicing against that, but it's not likely that we're going to play these kind of comps very often, and so there's more value in practicing against other teams that are going to play more of a standard play style. That would be my hypothesis, but it's definitely a good point. It is weird, and it is a little disappointing that C9 and FlyQuest can't scrim each other, because I'm really happy with how these two teams specifically are looking right
Yeah, I mean, we don't exactly know. Like maybe, like you just said, like they could just be playing random ass drafts in like their
now.
scrims. Like they could be trying things out, like the Lux and the Sona, or like maybe there's another draft that like people are doing in scrims that hasn't even been whipped out yet. But I don't know. In terms of, I know you said 15-3. I agree. They'll go 15-3. They'll win out the rest of the season. I have them making Worlds as NA's number one seed, and I think because they are the NA's number one seed, like that'll be like a pretty easy. That'll make it easy for them to get out of groups. Because
Knock
I
on
think,
wood.
yeah, knock on wood. But I think they will make it out of groups. This is looking like a strong team that can contend at international competition. I know you sort of went on the optimistic side in terms of them making it to semifinals. I wouldn't say I'm not optimistic, but I think I'm going a little bit conservative. I have them losing in quarters, and that's mainly because I don't think C9 is bad or will not contend at international competition. It's just that, looking at all the rest of the regions, I think the other regions are actually looking really, really good. I think for me personally, LCK is the favorite this year, and just watching LCK and watching teams like Kingzone, Damwon, Afrika Freaks, like SKT, they're kind of slumping a little bit, but SKT I think will be at Worlds and they're always contenders. But I think LCK this year is really really strong, and I think a lot of C9's results at Worlds are going to kind of be like how the other groups play out and what teams they get drawn into in the playoff bracket. Because just looking at the strength of teams, like I'll just run off I think the top teams in Europe, Korea, and China are. You have Mad Lions from EU, you have Rogue from EU, you have G2 from EU. I think they'll make a bit of a comeback. Plus, there's also EU's getting four spots at Worlds now, so I wouldn't be surprised if G2 gets their shit together and makes it to Worlds. You have Fnatic, who will probably make it to Worlds if there's four EU spots. Moving on to China, you have like Victory 5, JDG, IG, FPX if they can get their shit together. LCK, like I just mentioned, you have Kingzone or Dragon X. They're not Kingzone anymore, just Dragon X, Afrika Freaks, Damwon, SKT. Like these regions are all looking really, really good, and I think a lot of it is going to be how C9's group plays out and how other groups play out. Because if we get a situation similar to like Season 8 Worlds, where the eventual Worlds winner in IG was the number 2 seed coming out of that group that was Fnatic, IG, G Rex, and 100T. Like if we get a situation like that where C9 gets drawn into a potentially really like powerful team, like they can drop a game like that. And I think there's
Hmm.
so many good teams going into Worlds this year that kind of a situation can happen where you end up playing like the second best Chinese team or the second best Korean team or like a strong EU team like Mad Lions or something like that. So I think Worlds is going to be super loaded this year, and I guess that's why I'm taking a bit of a conservative approach in terms of where I think C9 is going to finish.
So I actually completely disagree with you when it comes to Europe. I've been watching every single EU game this split. I think this is the worst that Europe has looked in quite some time. Now, I do think that they do have some good teams. I think Mad Lions specifically is looking the best right now. I actually don't even think they're in first place. I think Rogue is. But specifically, I think Mad Lions
I
is
think
the
they're
only team
tied.
that I think looks really good. Regardless, I G2 has looked really bad. And yeah, I know a lot of people say there's still a lot of skill on this team, and there is, but they have not looked good whatsoever. And the same goes for Fnatic. These are two teams that consistently go to Worlds and are supposed to perform really well. I'm not seeing it this year, so that's where I'm a little different. I don't think Europe looks really good. I think that's one of the reasons why Cloud9 has a much better chance of making it a little bit further. But I do think that the two most likely outcomes are quarters or semis for this team. But yeah, I don't think I got too much more to say on Cloud9. We talked plenty about them so far this podcast. We even talked about them earlier with TL as well. So really excited for this team. I think they're the best chance that C9 has at success or pardon me, that NA has at Worlds this year. I think C9's the best chance of success.
Definitely agree.
Okay, run a little bit low on time, so to speak, but let's get on to our next topic here. We got the oh so common Pop Off and Bean Soup Awards, brought to you by King's Moo, of course. Pop Off, who you got popping off this past week?
I got closer popping off this week. Although in a 1-1 effort this week from Golden Guardians, this guy, he looked really good. He played Volibear in his first game against FlyQuest, and he actually was really helping Hanser out in the early game, and that was part of the reason why they had such a big lead. But specifically want to highlight his second game on Olaf against, who were they playing? Hunter T. They were playing Hunter T. They ran the Olaf jungle with the Karma top, and Closer pretty much just ran the whole game over. Like, the guy was unstoppable, no pun intended with the Olaf ult there, but like he was unstoppable. He wasn't getting slowed down. Like he got all the buffs, he got all the resources, and pretty much steamrolled the game. I think he had like 110 CS at like 12 and a half minutes or like 13 minutes in the game. He was either like 100 at 12 minutes or like 110 at 13 minutes. Like this guy was playing great, took control of the game, and just it was a pretty good week from Closer.
Yeah,
Definitely want to
it
give him
definitely
some
was.
praise.
Yeah, no, it definitely was, and I think that like maybe they got a really like giftful draft. Like I don't think they should have gotten as good of a draft as they did. 100 Thieves gave him a little bit of a gift there, but that doesn't change his performance. He was absolutely popping off. So I definitely think that that's a well-deserved award right there. I got Aframu this week though. Aframu, god damn, that Blitzcrank game was a 1v9. So I don't have too much to say because I talked a little bit about it earlier. But I think that team loses that game with just about any other support other than Core JJ, I suppose. That was such a heavy support carry performance. Really happy to see Aframu popping off. Really happy to see him do well after he's been dragged through the mud as far as Flame is concerned over the last 2 years, man. Really, really good for Aframu. He's my popping off this week.
Who you got for your bean soup? Because I'm going last on that one.
Bean soup. I got the Dignitas coaching staff and or management. I talked earlier about how Lorlo should be starting. It's that simple. Lorlo should be starting. You have a team that might make it to the playoffs here. You could go on a playoff run with how good your bot lane is performing, and your jungle's actually performing okay. Same with your mid. The only thing that is holding you back is your top laner, and it's so obvious in these LCS games that you watch that Viper is struggling. And I don't know why Lorlo isn't starting. It's tilting me. So Bean Soup, Dig coaches, and or management.
Yeah, for my bean soup, I have 100 Thieves for that. I don't know really what to call it. Their attempted mid gank on Demonte, but I'm just gonna roll the clip here.
And
Wow.
before you roll the clip, do you got the clip rolling yet?
No, no, no. Wait,
Okay, so before you roll the clip, I just want to let our listeners know that we're going to be showing a clip here. If you do want to check it out, I'm sure it's on Reddit somewhere, or you
it's
could
front
just check
page
the
Reddit
VOD.
somewhere.
You could check the VOD that we'll be uploading to YouTube. Definitely worth watching this clip. Go ahead and roll the clip, JNT.
Oh, sick. Well, that popped up, but here it is. So yeah, just for context, if you've seen it or watched the game, it's kind of the play that happens where 100T whiffs all their ults on Demonte mid, but
Pretty funny clip.
Yeah, I'll roll the clip.
So they should be able to wait this one out. The teleports for both top laners are synced up because of the bottom lane play. Oh, he's gonna mute it all on accident. Shocker's not gonna land. He's got to be kidding. They thought he juked.
Man.
And I'm out of there, baby.
Dude, he hit him with the camp tent, the tent emote. I gotta like that one. But like, oh my god, man, like so poorly played. Like they have a stasis target. Like, oh man.
Hold on. So poorly played, sure. I didn't think the Ash ult was that bad. That is something that's not exactly easy to time. But just the fact that you use 3 ultimates on that and he walks out with nothing on him is just what really got it for me. So I do like the Bean Soup award there. Well deserved. More so of a funny play. Not so much of a flaming bean soup, but more of a lull bean soup, if you know what I'm saying.
I am flaming. It was dog.
All right. Anyways, let's move on to our picks for week 8.
Here, let me get them up here real quick. All right, boom. So
I'll let you start.
Oh yeah, first game on Friday we have Team Liquid versus Dignitas. Both teams trending upwards, but I think Team Liquid's going to take this one. They're just better across the board. But honestly, I'm kind of hoping for this one to be a good game. I want to see, as we mentioned before, Dardoch and Aframu on some playmakers, and hopefully we can see a potentially competitive game. But I think most people are going to take TL on this one, obviously.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go with TL also. I can't consider Dignitas until Lorlo's starting, and I haven't heard of that happening yet. So just Team Liquid for me.
Next game on Friday, we got EG versus TSM. A pretty close game in terms of the level of play that both of these teams are at. But like I kind of mentioned before, in my opinions of TSM, I think this team just has too much talent to lose. And I'd be pretty surprised if Golden Glue goes even or like even ahead against Bjergsen. I'd be pretty surprised with that. Um, yeah, I got TSM on this one.
I do too, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's an upset. But I'm going TSM also. I don't got too much to say. I think EG's really hard to predict right now, and I think TSM's really hard to predict right now. But I'm going TSM.
Yep. And first game on Saturday, we got 100T versus FlyQuest. Two teams, I guess at this point, sort of trending in opposite directions. FlyQuest looking really, really good, strong to a week last week, and that's why I'm taking them.
Yeah, one team looks good, one team looks bad. It's just opposite trending directions. So FlyQuest for me.
And next, we got C9 versus Golden Guardians. This was what I would potentially consider a match of the week, kind of equal with the TSM versus C9 game on Sunday. I know that that's sort of like the better game in terms of storylines, but in terms of good play and draft and what I'm hoping to see, I think this is actually for me it's my game of the week. C9 versus Golden Guardians. Going to take C9 on this one, but one thing that I'm hoping to see out of this game is I hope we see like a competitive jungle pick and like jungle matchup. I want to see something like Olaf versus Lee Sin or like Olaf versus Graves, Lee Sin versus Graves. I think something super jungle centric could be super interesting. But I got C9.
Yeah, I got C9 also. I think now is crunch time for C9. It's the we're done fucking around C9 that I thought we were going to see this past weekend, and we kind of did in the first one, but I don't think they have any time to bring out any new picks, let's say. So I think C9 is going to be definitely full try hard, and so C9.
Yep, third game on Saturday. We have CLG versus Team Liquid. This is Team Liquid. I think we can go next
Team
on
Liquid
this one.
next.
Yeah, last game on Saturday, we got Dignitas versus Immortals. Two teams that are close in the standings, but I think we're both of the opinion that it's not so close in terms of the gameplay. I got Dig on this one.
Me too. Dignitas.
First game on Sunday, we have Golden Guardians versus CLG. I think everyone knows our opinions of CLG, and we're both taking Golden Guardians.
We don't need to shit on CLG anymore.
Yeah,
Golden Guardians.
we've done it. We've flamed them enough.
Yeah.
We'll save it for next week. And the other match you can consider being match of the week, you got C9 versus TSM. I got C9 on this one. I think it's going to be a similar, result as the previous C9 versus TSM match, with C9 potentially maybe going even in the early game if they opt for a bit of a slower draft. But come late game, just C9's coordination and overall team play, I got C9.
Yeah, I got Cloud9 also, and to me, this is the match of the week. Just for the reason you mentioned before, just the rivalry there. People love to watch Cloud9 versus TSM. This is where the viewership really spikes, and so this game's going to be at 5 p.m. EST for those listening. Definitely worth catching this game. I think it'll be really exciting. Cloud9 for me though.
Third game on Sunday, we got FlyQuest versus EG. Definitely, I think, an important game for EG if they want to make a bit of a push in terms of their seeding for playoffs and in terms of people's perceptions of EG going forward. If they're able to take a win off of a surging FlyQuest, I think that'll kind of put a bit of respect on their name in terms of playoffs, because I think people are kind of looking at them right now as potentially a non-factor. But I got FlyQuest on this one. But I think if EG wants to make a bit of a push and get some respect, they got to win this one. But I still got
The thing
FlyQuest.
is, I just don't know what EG is going to show up. Like, there's definitely a chance that the good EG shows up and they look good and they beat FlyQuest. But I have more confidence in the good FlyQuest showing up than the good EG, and so for that reason, it's FlyQuest for me. Do we have all the same picks, by the way, so far?
Yeah, it's kind of. I feel like it's like a kind of a cookie cutter week. But
I'm giving bean soup to us right now. Bean soup award. These predictions. What do you got for the next one?
we had a bunch of
I
differences
think we're gonna
last
differ
week.
on this one. I think we're gonna differ.
We are.
I hope so.
Oh, okay. I have
Who
100T
you
on this.
got?
I have 100T on this
Okay,
one.
good. I got Immortals. Let's fucking go, baby.
Okay. Yeah, I know this is I think it's a bit of a coin flip, this one. I want to see if I think Hunter T is going to win, but I think Immortals they need to bust out kind of like a nice draft and get maybe a Lorem on his Urgot or get Insanity on a bit of a comfort pick, or his comfort picks being like maybe like a Karthus or something like that. I think his Karthus has actually been really, really good. He's the only one playing Karthus. I think Karthus mid's actually pretty strong right now, but I got a 100T though.
Yeah, so I don't really have too much of a reason for going with Immortals other than I just think both of these teams are kind of weak right now. I don't see anything too amazing happening from either one of them. Um, I would say that Immortals is kind of like on like an even trend, so to speak, whereas 100 Thieves is a little bit on a downtrend. I do want to see both of these teams succeed. Unfortunately, in this one you can't, and I'm just gonna go Immortals. This is where earlier I said they could finish 3-15 or 4-14. This is the one where if they finish 4-14, this is the game that they're going to win. So I'll take Immortals on this one.
All right, that's going to do it for our picks for this week, and then we'll just move on to some potential bets. Sorry, Jamie, your face is getting covered up.
Cover me up.
So, any interesting bets you see from this week?
Yes, I think everyone knows I'm on Team FlyQuest right now. I think those are really good odds. I think we don't know what EG is showing up, and if we don't know what EG is showing up, I don't think that the 80 cents for EG makes any sense. I like the 91 cents that you're getting out of FlyQuest. I personally took FlyQuest in this one. I think I threw either $5 or $10 down on them, and I parlayed it with the Golden Guardians over CLG game. I think that that's a pretty decent payout and nothing too risky, but I think it's a good little bet there. And so I would advise to take a close look at those two games.
Yeah, I think kind of the opposite potentially for me is, we don't exactly know what EG could show up, and I think if we get the good EG, I think they got really good odds against TSM in that second one right there, EG versus TSM. I think we're kind of both wondering what EG is going to show up and if TSM can kind of get their shit together. So, it could be a decent gamble you could take on a 2.1 on EG.
And one thing I'll say about that one is if people are looking at the spread right now, it's EG plus 4.5 kills. If that does go to 5.5, I think that's really where the difference. I think that's a really big difference there. I would actually take EG plus 5.5 all day. So if on your betting website you do get the offer for plus 5.5, I think that's a really safe pick, and that'll give a decent payout as well.
Alrighty.
Okay, I think that's going to pretty much do it for our show. We got a lot of things to shout out before we close out. For those listening on YouTube, just be aware we do a live show every week on Monday nights at 9 p.m. EST. For those of you that are new to the channel, a lot of you have come over from Travis Gafford's show from Hotline League where JNT shouted us out last week. If you're sitting there waiting for the show to start, come over, hop in the channel, and don't be afraid to ask us any questions if you feel the need to. We love interacting with you guys. All the VODs will be up on YouTube for our live listeners. All the VODs will be up, so if you didn't get the whole live show, they're going to be up soon, later tonight. Also, we're on a lot of different, what do you want to call them? Platforms right now. So you want to give them a quick little rundown of what platforms we're now streaming on?
Yeah, I'll post a link in the chat right now for any live viewers that you got right now. But it's just a link to our Anchor. It's a podcasting platform that you can upload all your episodes to, and then it gets distributed on a bunch of different podcasting websites and platforms. I'll just list them all out right now. But you can listen to it on Spotify, Radio Public. Some of these ones I don't exactly know what they are, but Spotify is the main one. Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Google Podcasts, and Breaker. So those 5 platforms our podcast is all available on now. I'm definitely going to be posting all of the links to both our Anchor link and our links to Spotify specifically, because I know we're getting a lot of questions if we're on Spotify and what the link to it is or what to search for it is. So going to put all those in all the descriptions of all the YouTube videos. Yeah. Anything else to add?
Yeah, I just want to shout out our Twitters because you and I have tried to become more active on Twitter recently. And so if anybody wants LCS content on Twitter, that is, I can't speak for Nolan, but for myself, I am just basically tweeting out only things related to the LCS. And I did change my Twitter handle. It's now BlueJ_GG. So feel free to give that a follow if you like some LCS maybe comments during the LCS games. And Nolan as well, JNT, like I mentioned earlier, he tweeted out a pretty funny picture that he caught on
Insanity got the juice.
chugging his orange juice in the middle of the game. So feel free to hit us up on Twitter. We love to hear from you guys. We love to hear from you guys in the comment section. We love to hear you guys in live chat. So please do subscribe and follow us, and be sure to be active and like the videos if you guys are enjoying our content. So I don't have much else to say. I just want to say thank you to everyone that's tuning in. Love the support from everyone. It's really meant a lot to us.
Yeah, I try to read all the comments and I reply to all the comments on the YouTube videos. So if you have anything, any feedback, anything you think you'd like us to talk about on any episode or like an upcoming episode, definitely feel free to do that. We're always trying to stay on top of communicating with everybody, and like, and have anything to ask us, feel free to hit us up on Twitter or comment it on a YouTube video, and we'll definitely be there to respond.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Take care.